Buddy, last day of virtual learning for the hopefully for the last time for the year. Um, Only a few of you in here, so I'm just going to tread a little water really quick while we wait for other people to jump on in. Um, so you see in the post, hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving, by the way, and enjoyed the weekend and didn't put themselves at risk. And then coming back in the classroom only to have the class then shut down again. We don't need that. Oh, no, 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 no. We don't need that at all. But so far, so good. We're back in action tomorrow, ready to go. Here's the deal. I put some notes up. It's a weird file name. I don't know why, but the notes are up there. So check it out. You might have to preview it a different way. Mine doesn't work right on this laptop. I got to update because I don't have Word or the plugin set up for this, but I'll do that later. So basically, the notes for today are up there. Make sure you copy them into your notebook or on a piece of paper, and you can just stick it in your notebook when you get back to school tomorrow if you leave your notebook in the lockers. I'm fine with that. Always been fine with that. Totally cool with me. And we're going to basically, just run through the class today, run through the notes, and then I'll leave you for the rest of the day to check the 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock posts for the backup information, as well as to work on your projects. So, like I said here on the stream, what I'm asking you to do today is be sure that you have everything set up and ready to go for tomorrow. So, when you come in tomorrow, you are ready to do your recording. 6A is due Friday. That has not changed because the 2 days we were out, you could be spending doing the research and the writing and everything that's necessary to do what you need to do. Plus, you also have 6B due next week, next Friday. So, a lot of projects that are going to come fast and furious. And you should spend the time wisely today and on Wednesday or Tuesday of last week, getting yourself prepared. So when you come in, there's no like, oh, I'm working on it. Oh, I'm doing this. I'm doing it. It doesn't matter. You should be ready to go. You should have your script ready. You should have your sounds captured. You go on YouTube, right? And you can grab a bunch of different things and have them ready to edit into your project. This is not very difficult. You could do this with a Chromebook and download an MP3 and stick it on a flash drive or stick it on your Google Drive, whatever it is that you need to do in order to get yourself prepared. So when you walk in tomorrow, you have 4 straight days of recording and editing ready to go. No excuses on just being unprepared for class tomorrow. We talked about this on Tuesday. And of course, I'm talking about it now. And I'm putting it up on the Google Classroom. Have all your paperwork, your script, and your sounds prepared and ready to go tomorrow. So you hit the ground running because we are not changing due dates. Like I said, at this point, all your research and writing should have been done at home. That was part of what this class is going to continue doing. For my people that are virtual students, they have nothing but writing to do. So there's a lot of preparatory work that needs to go into my in-person learners to get their writing out of the way so then they can come in and do their recording. So we are confirmed, by the way, to come back in tomorrow. Tomorrow we will have class as usual. And also, again, don't forget to check the posts at 12 and 2 o'clock today. Backup and supporting information on our Studio Acoustic lessons will be up there. So if I go over here and basically check the Classwork page, which you should be doing as well every single day to see what's coming up, what's due, what's available, what you have done, what you have not done, what you've handed in and graded, what has not been graded. I will be getting through some of the rest of Project 5 that I do not need audio for today. Anyone that did audio for Project 5, I'll have to wait till I get back into class tomorrow to go through it and make sure everything is confirmed that you did the correct thing. So those will be graded today as much as I can do from home. Project 6A is going to be due on December 4th, as you can see here. Please, again, make sure you have all your paperwork, script, and sounds that you need to put into the project. Just as a refresher, if you didn't know what it was, Project 6A is censorship. So make sure you have your song downloaded and ready to go. And you need to have at least 5 edits on a song that's inappropriate. for class or for high school in that matter. Even if it's hell, if you want to edit out hell, I'm okay with that. That's an edit. Probably not appropriate for the class, probably be fine on the radio. But as long as you have 5 total edits, and what I suggest for this for my first year students is you print out the lyric sheet. That's just a recommendation. The lyric sheet, print it out, and that way you can actually see the words. And now, if you print out the lyric sheet, attach that to your top sheet or add that into the Google Docs, because that'll help you again go through and make sure that everything that is inappropriate has been edited out. For my second year students, um, this is something you should have been working on last week. You should have already gotten your book out of the library or searched through your home or your niece's or nephew's home, or during Thanksgiving, gone through their bookshelves and picked out a book that's a relatively recent book, last 20 years, something that has been on the bestseller. And there's hundreds of books that are on the bestseller list every year. And I was looking for a first grade reading level. You could do second grade, it's fine. I just don't want kindergarten. I just don't want something more advanced like third grade, because at third grade, books aren't 20 pages, you know? And the younger books could be 40 pages, but there's only a few words on each page. So it was just about the timing of it. That's why these parameters were placed into the project. So within 5 minutes is what I want this to be. And basically, you're going to just go through and read the book. And then when you get back into class, or if you want to record in class, obviously, but you also need to have some of the things in the background. Like if you're looking at a page and it's in a playground, I want to hear the playground in the background, as a bed level sound. There could be, kind of story time like music going on as well. Just something to make it almost like a book on tape, but very, very uh, interactive, or it engulfs the reader in all the sound that they should be hearing while looking at the book. That's kind of what we're going for here. So just make sure that you have all of your sound design elements ready to go for tomorrow. Your music and your sound effects should be prepared on your flash drive, second year students. And first year students, make sure you walk in with the song ready to be edited tomorrow. And if that wasn't enough, obviously, then you have Project 6B, which isn't due until next week, but it's a much lengthier project. And that's why I gave you 3 weeks to work on this, 3 weeks to work on Project 6B. For my first year students, it's coming up with the business plan and model for a recording studio. And for my second year students, it's coming up with a business plan and model for a radio station, which is a little more involved. So make sure you read through those. And again, if you're looking for something to work on, those are the things to work on, because they're going to be due faster than you probably would like them to be. And since we missed 2 days of class, I would focus on getting the recording and editing done on tomorrow, and then editing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then once you've finished a bulk of that work and you're looking for more work, well, there it is. And I know you're not looking for it, but you're going to get it. So there it is, 6B, locked and loaded for everyone to do. And this is just a purely writing project, regardless of who you are, first year or second year, or in person or virtual. All right. So there it all is laid out for you. Make sure that you go through everything and get it done systematically. Prepare yourself. Get yourself in a place where every day what you need to do, what goals need to be accomplished along the way, and you'll be fine. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about for any person who works in any industry. Knowing what you have to do that day. You don't want to show up to work without uniform. You don't want to show up to work without the stuff you need to be prepared to do your job, to get paid, to make a living, to make a salary, to get your benefits, to have vacation time, to do all the stuff that an adult does and should be doing in order to survive and to live a good life. You don't want to be searching around for a job at 30 years old, still unsure of what you want to do. And even if it is something what you want to do, not being prepared for it each and every day. So like I said, I'll be grading a bunch of the projects that I can grade from home, and then I'll continue that tomorrow when we get back in class, and then we should be all caught up by Friday. There is going to be a quiz on Friday. I have not loaded it into the Classwork page. As you can see, there'll be quiz number 12 coming out for unit number 12, which is the Studio Acoustic Design. So again, check out the notes, write them in your notebook, and let's get started. All right. So I actually, again, a lot of the information that's in this class is being derived from the Modern Recording Techniques book that, every year comes out with a new edition, updating its information, new technology, new science that has been done in regards to how things should be. And, as we know, even today in regular society, science changes so fast, so much that there are new strategies and new techniques. So this is, I think, one of the most current versions of modern recording techniques, and a lot of the curriculum of our class uses this modern recording technique guideline. And even a lot of college classes use the modern recording technique guideline. In fact, I used the modern recording technique guideline in Hofstra and in NASA, and I still have my original books back from in college. I never returned them and got my $20 back. Spend 200, get $20 back. Isn't it a wonderful scam they have going on there at the colleges? And honestly, a lot of the colleges today use digital prints, and it's a lot cheaper, but still, it's still money spent on books and equipment and supplies and stuff like that. A lot of times, though, if you're smart and you know how to look on the internet and you know how to search the internet, you can find some of this stuff right here. And I did. I found a nice free copy of Modern Recording Techniques through the internet on a website called studfile.net. Great resource for some textbooks and stuff in our industry. And I mean, just look how many topics there are in regards to all of this. And yes, it is a foreign, as you can see, a foreign website. And don't worry, we're not going to get scammed. Everything will be fine. I've used this website before. But you can see, lots and lots and lots of topics here that even go into further detail along the way. So, for the most part, what I've done is kind of broken out this unit, this week's information into four major topics. The first one we're going to deal with today are this idea of acoustic isolation and frequency balance and acoustic separation within a space and the reverberation that happens within the space, because these are all things that we're going to have to talk about when we get back to class, because our class is not really designed for sound per se. We've done some things to help with the sound control, but it really wasn't designed with like a studio in mind. As we walked into booth number 6 and we saw there's a lot more acoustic absorption on the walls, the things change a little bit. We've added some small rooms like the vocal booth, like the drum room, like some of the small things that go over the amplifiers in booth number 6. So, there's been a lot of changes and things that have gone on over the years to help with acoustic isolation and keeping the outside sound out and keeping the inside sound in without fully changing how that sound should appear and in the end translate to a recording. One good thing I do want to mention is that the IT gentleman that was there prior to Thanksgiving has gone through and has changed out and swapped out every single computer in all the booths. And he's working on software. We might have a few interruptions in the morning of stuff that works and doesn't work. We'll just have to roll with the punches if we want to make sure we're getting these computers in, running, and working correctly. So we'll work around that as we get in. I'll get a full, um, rundown of exactly what was done and what hasn't and what still needs to be done. I'll have to work with him throughout the week to make sure that our studio is fully open and operational, and we can start actually doing some bigger adjustments and bigger upgrades to the booths now that the new computers are in. So for a little while, we're going to have, a lot of stuff not looking the same, not looking whatever, but that's a good thing. We're actually making big strides in getting things to be a lot better and more up to date and faster computers and more plugins and lots of great stuff. So I'm excited about that. All right, let's get into acoustic isolation. And just speaking of that, our booths, they're not acoustically insulated. There's no way. These are things that were here before I got here. They are what amounts to office cubicles. But what we've done in those booths, and each booth has its own kind of style and feel and layout, is we've tried to reduce the amount of standing waves. And that's really the biggest thing we want to talk about when we're designing recording studios. We want to get rid of standing waves. Standing waves are really waves that are bouncing back and forth within a space that can, number one, interrupt a recording. But number two, and probably most importantly for your booths, is really kind of mess around with how you perceive sound, how sound out of the speakers isn't necessarily the sound that you're perceiving. So sound coming out of the speakers directly to your ears is called direct sound. Anything else that's in the studio space bouncing around and hitting your ears at different times is really changing your perception. So we want to do our best in a lot of cases to control that sound. And sound doesn't always have to be coming out of the speakers either. It could be coming from the outside environment. For instance, in your booths 1 through 5, there's no roof. So anything that happens out in the classroom lab space is coming right over the top of the booth into that room, bouncing around potentially, and changing the way you perceive sound. What have we done to adjust for this? Well, in each booth, we have acoustic absorption material, stuff to kind of cut down on the amount of waves bouncing back and forth. We really can't put the absorption on the glass panels. So we try to treat all the other walls in one way, shape, or form to reduce the amount of standing waves. Number two, we don't necessarily do monitoring through the speakers. They're there to do a session of monitoring. And I'll get to that a little later when we get into class. They're there to be played out loud, but we can't have everyone playing out loud at the same time, all of those waves bouncing around, all the stuff happening. So we'll get into the strategy and the process of monitoring in those booths as we get closer to the end of the year, or really to the end of this week. And then at the end of the year, and this is fingers crossed, when things get better, when the vaccine is out in April, March and April, apparently now, I've heard it this morning, that we should see a very huge influx in the amount of the vaccine available to every single person by April. By April, guess what? We're all in the booths together. We're back to doing group projects. We're back to being next to each other. We're back to hopefully masks being off. We're back to relatively normal life. We're going to see how that all turns out. I'm not making any promises right now. But what I'm saying is once we get to that point, yeah, then things like playing sound out loud and monitor speakers means a lot to the process. No studio recording engineer only does his mix in headphones. They play stuff out loud. Now, today, what can we do to adjust for that? Well, since we can't play sound out loud technically in the class during class time, or we can't be together listening and partaking in a group listening event, we can do a few things. We can take the wave file, a mixed down wave file. We can put it in our phones and listen to it there and see what it sounds like there. We can bring it home and send it through speakers in our cars on a Bluetooth device out of, anything that, even on Alexa, you can link up Bluetooth to Alexa or Google Home or a million of those other devices that are out there. And we can monitor from different places as well. And we should. Again, I'm going to go through that process when we get out to the monitoring lesson later in the year. But what we want to really focus on when we're recording and when we're monitoring is really doing our best to try to get the recording to be as natural as possible. Now, what does that mean? That's a big question. Does the piano that play in a huge concert hall sound natural if you put the mic 5 inches away from the strings? Maybe not. If we put a mic out into the audience, do you capture natural sound? Maybe. How can we adjust for all these things? These are things we have to think about. Does the space lend itself for a good recording? Does the plug-in work that we can do in post-production represent an accurate space that we recorded in the first place? These are all things that we need to consider while we're going through the process from start to finish. Again, this is why pre-production is so important. Understanding the direction you want to head in is extremely important. And if you're not paying attention along the way, if you're not understanding how to get from point A to point B, well, that's when you have to go back to what we're doing now. And that's the whole premise of what we do now, is to get you to start to understand an acoustic space and what it's like to get that effective natural sound. And there's lots of techniques to do that. Here, let's take a look at acoustic isolation. So you see on my screen here, there's this little studio, various isolation and acoustical treatments for recording and monitoring environment. So they break down the walls too. And that's a big part of this as well, is what's not just on the wall, what's behind the wall. How was the studio created? Was it separate from the ground? Was there stuff done in the walls? See, again, acoustic isolation, if you look at your notes, is the prevention of external noises from transmitting into the sound environment where you're going to be recording. And it's not just about what's inside, it's a lot about what's outside. How can I separate the truck that drives by, the train station that's almost a half a mile away? How do I get those low end vibrations that are traveling along the ground out of my recording studio and being recorded into my mics? We talked about using a shock mount to get rid of those vibrations. But that's not always it. What if that train vibrated the walls? The walls vibrated and that moved air. And when air is moved, sound is made, even if it's very low. And that sound could travel within the space and be recorded into the microphone, even though it does have a shock mount on it. So, yes, we can put stuff on the walls, as you can see in this image, which is great. But that's not necessarily everything that needs to be done. Let's take a look at this next figure. Transmission loss, which is a term that we're going to talk about tomorrow in class. But transmission loss has a lot to do with how that material in the walls filters out certain frequencies. So as the direct sound hits the outside wall, some of it might be reflected, some of it might be absorbed, and some of it does translate into the room or in the next area or space. So how much was lost in between? That's where our transmission loss starts to come into play. So if you happen to have the luxury of building a studio from the ground up, wow, I had that luxury when I built my first studio. I had a blank canvas and I built new floors. I built a wall within a wall. I was able to isolate and remove all elements of the rest of the house from the recording studio. I built the ceiling down about 5 inches, completely separate room. I'm really able to take my time and make sure that everything I did reduced sound translating into the room. Acoustic isolation means reducing the amount of sound that comes into the recording space. And I think I have some sheets and stuff that I'll put up on the Google Classroom today, but a lot of this has to do with these absorption coefficients and transmission losses and surface density and thicknesses. And listen, we're not going to go into the mathematical equations that you could see here, because this is more of a college level thing that they'll talk about. But there is some sort of rating that goes into materials. If you're using brick or concrete, glass or lead or sand or steel or wood, there is definitely something to what you're using in order to reduce the amount of sound going into a space. Basically, how much acoustic isolation do you have? Now, this is one of the things that I ended up doing in my studio. You could see the offset studs here in the middle picture. I'll throw my mouse around here. So that's what I did. I built two walls instead of building one wall, right? And allowing both sides of the wood to have a wall on it. I built two walls, separate, freestanding, where there was no vibration that can translate from one wall to the next. They had their own offset studs. So I did 16 on center on the left wall here, and I did 16 on center offset on the right wall. And again, that allowed me to reduce the amount of transmission from one space to the next, basically acoustically isolating one room from the other. And it also means from the outside wall. And if you can do this with a single stud wall board, then that's fine as well. Just make sure that you're leaving some space. You're allowing some freestanding from the ground. Again, translation of vibrations through the ground is a big deal. You really have to be careful on, what you're doing to your floors. And you could see here's a great little image of kind of what happens when you start drilling your studio into concrete, or this is a speaker actually that's sitting on concrete, but those things translate. And look, to further acoustical isolate your studio, you probably should be building a multi-layered floor that allows you to kind of float that floor above the rest. Again, reducing the amount of vibrations, transmission of sound from floor, walls, and ceiling. So they make these risers, which are really very cool from Oralex, where you can lay these pieces of wood down. We call them sleepers. And these sleepers will lay in these channels of very hard rubber. And the U-boat rubber will basically reduce all of the vibrations coming through the floor. As for the ceilings, as you can see, they do make specialized floating ceilings. I just literally pulled it down off. So I really didn't need to go crazy with, creating these really, I guess, difficult setups. I just pulled the ceiling off the adjacent or above ceiling, and we call it a drop ceiling. Really, that's all I ended up doing. The other things you have to start thinking about is your windows and doors. So in the control room, we usually have a nice straight piece of glass, but in the studio, you usually have an angled piece of glass. And by the way, BT Dubs Double Dubs, we did order a brand new studio window for booth number 6 that will be mounted right above the Raven system. And that is a specialized, customized piece of material that again reduces transmission from of sound from studio to control room. And again, this is how you acoustically isolate certain areas. Now, I can do that all I want, but then if video production has a piece of glass that amounts to a piece of paper, then what good is it when I can hear the kids in the next room? So you'll have to then address that wall. Then you'll have to address the wall that is behind our chalkboard. Then you'll have to address the wall behind that goes to the back of the building. Now, that wall to the back of the building is actually really good. That's like the best one that we have. So the other three walls all have to be addressed in some way. The ceiling, we've done some things to the ceilings. We added those acoustic panels. Our room is unlike many of the rooms in our building in that we have a 2.5-inch thick fiberglass ISO sound reducing panel that fits into our drop ceiling. With that said, we also have parts of that that were removed and sound can still travel up into the space above us, but there's a very large space above us, which allows sound to bounce around and lose a lot of its energy. So we do have a very good transmission loss through our walls and through our classrooms. Another way that we can acoustically isolate is that we can create ISO rooms. And we have one of these ISO rooms. Now, we didn't build it into the structure of the building. We actually bought an ISO booth. And that's what ISO means. It's the ability to isolate the sound within that space. Now, obviously, if you want an ISO room for a drum kit, you're going to need a much bigger space. But our space kind of works in a lot of great ways. We can do vocal recordings. We can stick an amplifier in there and just record the amp. We can stick a trumpet player, a horn player, maybe not a trombone, needs a little more room in there, I guess. But we can put any number of handheld instruments in there as well. So it actually is the right size space for what we needed it for the classroom. And then if we wanted to go over again to the drum room in booth number 6, we have and we purchased that huge acoustic panel area. So we have our glass that's reflective. We have our absorption on the back walls. Everything about 3 feet down is absorbed. So it helps reduce the amount of sound in the space. Even in something like a control room, you're going to want to reduce the amount of sound going into that control room. So if I'm in a drum room in an adjacent room, I don't want those drums to change the way I'm listening and monitoring to it in the studio. That way you get a good, accurate recording and representation of it. And as an engineer and as a mixing engineer, you want, the exact perceived sound that's coming through that mixing board and those monitors. So you want to reduce the amount of sound that's kind of jumping in between the spaces. So basically, just noise control within the control room itself. Obviously, you need to have the best possible space to do your monitoring. And if you don't have that space, you could be changing how you perceive sound. And that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. Now, it does start talking about partitions and symmetry and room design. And so this is where I would like to kind of bring up one of our other definitions in the notes today. That is acoustic separation. So partitions, I also call them flats or gobos, and we have a couple of these in the studio. You've seen them. They're used to provide an on-the-spot barrier for sound leakage, and sound leakage is always considered that separating out of sound. If you look at the shields that we have here for the drum room and for the amplifiers, I would even consider these to be more of acoustic separators than acoustic isolation, right? These things are not soundproof like our vocal booth is. It's not airtight. It doesn't have a tremendous amount of absorption material. So these things, as great as they are going to have a lot of leakage. But within a single space, these things can all be recorded very accurately when you're using these Clear Sonic ISO packs. So that's the brand we use is Clear Sonic. So you could see the drum room down here, and you could see the guitar kind of ISO area here. So these systems allow you to kind of separate out as best you can direct sound from each individual instrument. So in the same space, you can have a drum, a bass, a guitar. You can set up these Clear Sonic shields, and then you can record a very, very accurate representation of the sound without having to put them in all different rooms or record them at all different times. So this is where the idea of acoustic separation comes in. So acoustic separation is the acoustic space should not interfere with the intelligibility of the sound, which just means we're taking the instruments in the space and moving them apart and making sure that they don't interfere with each other as well as the environment. And you can see here, even in a situation where you only have one space to record things like vocals, and you have the mixing board and a piano all in the same space, you can use these flats. Again, we have some of these in the studio to separate out. So the monitoring guy and the mixing can happen with the piano in the same room. The vocalist has these barriers up preventing the waves that are traveling from the piano to go directly into his microphone. You can see this little space that was set up that works very well. And again, if we go on to Sweetwater here and we start looking at things like the SE Electronics reflection filter, I'll let that load up for a minute, that you're going to have these concepts and ideas come up while describing these pieces of equipment. And again, it's not always just about I'm going to be mixing music for the rest of my life. There's so many other job opportunities in our industry that if you know more about how this science of sound works, then you could accurately represent that, sell for those companies. Here's another great little example of a homemade flat. So someone used just absorption material and added hinges to it. Then you can kind of move it around the space. If you're going to do a recording studio at your house and you don't have the ability to put up soundproofing on the walls or bass traps in the corner or anything like that, you probably going to want some sort of movable barrier that'll allow you to arrange and to break down at the end of the day. If you're doing a session and you're working throughout the day, but your mom still wants to use the living room or your mom still wants to use the laundry room, you don't want to have things stuck on the wall where you can't move them or manipulate them. So having these movable barriers, flats, or they call them gobos, allow you the flexibility to kind of move around and change things. Here's something really quick, and we're going to get into this in just a moment. The frequency balance of a room is really important. All right. So what frequency balance means is that we're trying to prevent any of the elements that are within the room to have an adverse effect on the acoustic balance of a room and the instrument in that space. Here's what that means. I play a violin. That violin has a lot of mid to high frequency sounds. All right. Now, if I put a tremendous amount of absorption material on the walls, and absorption material usually has a very high absorption coefficient in the mid to high range, then I'm going to be sucking a lot of the life out of that violin when I record it. Even if I do a nice, close, direct, close miking technique, I'm still going to get, this flat sound. And you don't want to do that either. So there are certain strategies that we're going to look at throughout the week that tell us this is the appropriate amount of absorption that needs to be had at this frequency, low, at this frequency, high. What kind of reflection we can allow that actually might help the recording. What material is behind the absorption material? What's on the ceiling? What's on the floor? What's on the back wall? In the control room space for the person that's mixing and monitoring, how does the frequency of the mix coming out of the speakers sound when it's placed in a room in certain areas? If you look at this top image here and you place your mixing engineer way off to the right, there's all this space off to his left or her left that could be changing the way you would perceive sound once it reaches you. After it's traveled in this little area here, how, when it gets to you, does it sound? So we talk about symmetry, and frequency balance means, having a good balance of all of the things you need. You want balance in your room as well. This example here, example A, is one of the better ways to set up your sound. You're not against the wall. You're separated out from the wall. Your mixer or your monitoring is just the core of that setup is kind of in the middle of the room, balanced in the room. If you're using B here, the shifting the position here will greatly improve your left-right imagery because you have exact amounts of space on either side. But anything that gets sent back behind the listener, which is this area back over here, might be changed, might be skewed. I don't know if I'm going to want that. So you have to really consider the elements, the strategy, the measurements, the science of how that all is going to be when you get to a certain element. So here's the idea of frequency bounds. All right. I'm gonna get rid of this little ad. I don't know why that ad pops up in the middle of the thing. But think about it this way. How do I get rid of this little guy? Can I get rid of it by scrolling through it? Oh no. Let me reload the page and see if I can get that little ad to go away. There we go. Ah, really? What if I push this? Nope, bad idea. Is there an X that happens? Guess not. Anyway, so basically, frequency balance is the idea that we're trying to maintain all of the same perception wherever you are within the room. You start by with the idea of symmetry, being able to bounce signals, waveforms moving, absorption material, high, mid, low frequency. You basically want your room to exhibit a relatively flat frequency. You don't want any part of the room to have any more of a cut or a boost than any other part of the room. So if you look at this one, this is great. The response over the entire audio range without adding a particular sound coloration. Right. So if I'm an engineer and I'm monitoring in this space, it seems like I have a pretty even idea of what's going on coming out of these speakers. And look, this is a model of all of the potential direct sound waves and how they would bounce in a space. It's a good idea to start thinking about this when setting up a home studio. You know, you put up your desk against the wall because it's out of the way. You put your speakers right up against the back wall. But what happens out of the back of the speaker? There's still vibrations back there. I know you're not getting direct sound. And what's that wall behind those speakers made of? And what's going to happen to the sound? Reflections are really hard to deal with. And look, this is just an overview, but what if you did a side angle? You can't just think of things in this horizontal idea. You got to think of it vertically as well, and actually in all dimensions. So you really have to think about how your ceiling and your floors are treated, how that sound is going to be bounced out, the angle at which your speaker is to the person listening. You know, you've seen these, right? These are the mopeds that are on every single speaker in our studio, in every booth, on my desk. These things are key to not only absorbing some of the information, but also to angling the speaker directly to the listener. Part of the frequency balance is getting the perfect direct sound, the perfect third triangle between the speakers and the listener. We saw this earlier in the lesson today, but then it gets a lot more scientific as we go through. So, what do we do to this space? We have reverb, we have sonic reflections within a space that are bouncing all over the place, as you can see here. How do we control that? How do we change the way that the behavior of those waves? And so there is a lot of math and science that goes into this. Again, I'm not going to have you do frequency balancing and checking that out with material and cross-referencing it into what can be used and what shouldn't be used. But the types of materials are what we're going to get into this week. Commercial diffusers, which are great. I think I ordered a few this year just to have around. And I'm actually in the process of building my own wooden diffuser, a nice little art piece that might go into the studio. As we said, there's so much balance that needs to be had in the studio. We really have to look at the high frequency absorbers, the low frequency absorbers, the types of material that can be used, the position of those materials in the studio. Where's direct sound? Where's indirect sound? How do we change the balance to create a flat, even mix of all of the signals coming out of the speakers? We will get into bass traps, where there's a couple of different kinds: quarter, pressure, functional. You've seen the functional ones here. We've had those in studios before. Reverberation is really, really important to understand how it works. We talked about concave and convex surfaces, correct? So if you look at this particular reflective material, absorptive material, this design element that they use in recording studios, they're thinking about it in terms of breaking the sound on a convex surface, absorbing the sound behind that on a 90-degree angle corner, and what that does to remove all these sounds that could potentially bounce around and change the way you are perceiving your mix or the way the mic is recording the sound. And it goes very, very very far. And we're going to get more into the reflection ideas as the week goes on. I just wanted to see if there was anything else here in regards to, yeah, we'll get into echo chambers and we'll talk about, um, that's more power conditioning and studio, different types of studio setups. So I think that's all I wanted to cover for today. Let me just check my notes here. We talked about acoustic isolation, but prevention of outside noises, and even within the studio, between studios, the acoustic separation of sound within a certain space. We talked about frequency balance, and the elements within a room shouldn't adversely affect acoustic balance within a room. The instrument being played within the space, a drum, a guitar, a bass, they should all be able to be recorded individually in the same space if you're using the correct acoustic separation treatment and techniques. We really want to think about reflection and reverberation within these spaces and see where direct sound meets indirect sound, how things can change in your perception between the microphone that's recording something and the mixing engineer who's monitoring something. These are all very, very, very important parts of the entire process when setting up and designing a recording space, a recording studio, or whatever it is you want to do. It's exhausting to talk for 45 minutes. So, does anybody have any questions? I can answer them now about Project 6A, 6B. We're in class tomorrow, as everyone knows. Right back into class. What do we got? Anything about studio recording?
Oh, I wanted to say over the weekend I built a cable board
Okay.
that holds 24 cables. I have
Okay.
it up on my camera. I don't know if you see it.
Hold on. Open that up. Oh, there you go. Look at that. Okay. So it was
Yes.
like a pegboard that you're going to have on the wall?
Yeah, I got a sheet of hardwood
Yeah.
and I had them cut it down and then I
Mhm.
put 2x4s around the outside, the whole edge.
Okay.
And I put so I have 24 hangers I'm that are now mounted. That's a older picture.
Right.
And then I have at the bottom, I have larger hooks that I bought for any bigger cables, so I could hold at least
So here's
24.
the question. Two things. Where is it going to be located? And is that pegboard going to change the way sound travels in your space?
I mean, it's hardwood, so if anything, it's probably gonna deaden the sound right here.
Uh-huh. Would you have a
So,
big
which I
open
have a big
space there?
open wall. Yeah,
Yeah. So you're going to have to do something there to break up the sound. Now, to be honest, just looking at that board, you could say that there are different depths when cable is on there, right? There's different spots. There's the cable on the pegboard, there's the board itself, and then there's the wall itself. So you have a couple of different depths. So as sound is bouncing and traveling in that space, the roundness of the cable, the material of that board that you're using, those things could act as absorbers or reflectors. You might have to do a few sound tests with it up on the wall to see what it does to the perception of sound when you're monitoring. Because I could see your speaker off to your right,
yeah,
and is that going to change the way direct sound travels along that wall? And it might. So you might have to do a few tests with it on the wall and off the wall and see if that really does change perception once you have it up there. And then it's
Would
not a
you
bad thing if
suggest-
it changes it, just know how it changed and then
yeah.
know how to proceed when you're doing your next monitoring mixing session.
Would you suggest stuff because I made a full border of 2x4? Would you suggest me getting more foam to put inside of it, almost as like a
So what here's something I don't know why Sweetwater didn't load. Oh, they did. They make uh, cloud. Let's just put this in here for a minute. So they make other dense materials like this. Now, I wouldn't buy this, but
yeah,
I'm just doing it for the material itself. And so this is like a really hard fiberglass, like we have above the chalkboard. If you come in tomorrow, the two panels are above the chalkboard in our room are this type of material. These are
yeah,
clouds. They're made of very dense uh, fiberglass, not like soft pull off insulation type stuff. And so what that does is it absorbs that mid to high range what you could do at a Home Depot is you could find a material very close to this, mount it behind the pegboard. So cut a piece that's the same size as the pegboard, and then mount that whole thing in there. So not only now does your pegboard become functional, but then it'll also becomes an absorber from behind it. So you'll have some reflection through the wood and around the cable, but then behind that, you're not going to get the vibration or the reflectiveness, because this thing will be doing some of that for you.
Yeah, because I was thinking why not? Because I built a full border around it,
Mhm.
so nothing falls behind it and gets stuck back there.
Right.
But I might as well stuff it with some sort of, something to keep the sound down too.
Yeah, I just wouldn't use the very like fluffy material. Don't use like house insulation. You got to find something. There's a product called Homosote. Homosote is what I used to use in my walls behind the sheetrock, and I think that's how you spell it. Homosote, sorry. And so this material is at Home Depot or Lowe's, and it's not super expensive. This is a full, let's say, plywood size sheet for $30.
Yeah, I
So
see it.
that would be a 4x8 for $30, and that is a cellulose foam board. It's closed cell, but it also absorbs. So you could see people when using in building materials, and you can see they're already saying it's a great thing for sound barriers, which is what I used in my recording studio. So you can see it's placed behind the sheetrock for more acoustic isolation of the space. So building manufacturers do this for apartments in other people's houses. You know, if you want to cut down on the transmission of sound from one apartment to the next, or from, your house to your rental that you have below you, this is a great material to use.
So would you say take that, since I get a full sheet of it, would you say take it and split it up? Because that board is 3 foot
Yeah.
by 4.5. So would you say split it up and double layer it behind there?
No, I don't know if double layering is necessary. A single layer would probably be enough,
Okay.
because of what it is, and they might even have smaller sheets. Like I said, this is 4x8, so if you have a 2x4 board, then you could just cut it in half, and then or just buy a 2x4 piece. They
Yeah.
might actually have them in smaller pieces. Hold on,
Because
stop
whatever
my
I can
dog from
do
eating my
with,
chair. 1 second.
yeah.
Get down. Get down. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. What'd you say at the end there?
Yeah, because if there's anything I could build per se to buy, I'd much rather do that. Because
Yeah, it's much cheaper,
much
obviously, to just get a piece of Homosote than it is to do anything else. They make them everywhere. I got mine at Home Depot for relatively cheap. They make ones that are professional grade, but then they just make the regular ones that you could use in basic construction. So cool. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else?
Yeah.
What's up? Alejandro, what up, buddy?
What's up? So let's say in my room, since I already have carpet,
Okay.
that helps, right?
Yes.
But I was wondering if I could just use like some like kind of insulation blankets type.
For what? For you want them on the wall, the ceiling? What were you looking to do?
Like on the parts of the walls where it's like the most bare, and then on
Yeah.
the ceiling parts of it. I was thinking about getting pads too, but like for now, all I have is like some blankets.
And blankets are fine. I mean, they're not going to have this professional absorption coefficient that we're going to talk about later this week. But anything that can absorb sound, like a curtain, a blanket, you want to make sure that you just have something that's kind of thick. And I wouldn't obviously, mount it to the wall. You might be able to throw it over a door or drape it between two dressers or something like that. It'll work. I mean, the best thing to do if you're doing vocal recording, obviously, is to get that reflection filter. That to me
Yeah, I
is
have
the
that.
golden thing, where you don't need to drape anything at that point. But if you're doing something open in the room, not only is the floor important, though, you got to remember your ceiling being important. I pulled up here, and again, these are expensive, so I'm not saying get this, but there's other ways of doing it. They specifically make things that hang from the ceiling, because the ceiling could be an area of reflection. So if you remember or recall over at booth 6, I have 3 panels right above and angled towards the mixing engineer that would be sitting at the control station at the Raven system. And that is to, again, cut down on a couple of things, reflection off the ceiling, but also it helps change the angle of the space. And we'll talk more about that this week as well, that some of the angles are really important. So when we talked about, the acoustic separation, or really the isolation, it's not just about the material. It's also about the space being symmetrical, but not parallel, because waves travel really well when they have parallel surfaces. But you change that angle by 5 degrees or more, and you can really reduce the amount of reflections getting into your recording or in back to the space for the mixing engineer. So yeah, you could throw the blankets up, Alejandro. You could get a reflection filter. What probably would be best is the reflection filter at this point, and then maybe just grab an extra piece of acoustic treatment to cover the top of the reflection filter so the ceiling doesn't play a part in the reflection issue.
Yeah, I was about to say, I've seen like before, like people drape like a blanket over the reflection filter and
Yes.
go under it to record.
Yeah, you could do that. If you have some stands or something like that to just kind of create a vocal booth. There is I think I was looking this up the other day, one of those types of reflection filters that address that. So this was the Aston mics do it. We did talk about the chaotic eyeball having that element of being 360-degree isolation of the microphone. You could see that these kind of cup a little bit at the top, and that does change some of what is coming and hopping over the top of the mic. As SE does a great job, you could see it's completely open at the top. So if you have any reflections coming in off the ceiling, that is going to travel downward into your mix. So you might get a little bit of that, backlash from that.
You could like angle those in a way so it's like
you can angle them down, but now you got to talk or rap or sing up into it. So yeah, there's ways around it. But you, like you said, if you wanted to just drape a sheet or something like that just over the top, don't come all the way over the person's head. Just drape it over the top here. That will cut down a little bit on any of that sound from the ceiling.
Yeah.
And having the carpet is great. You really definitely want to have at least one full surface acoustically treated, and then address the other surface lightly, again, keeping frequency balance in mind. You don't want something that's going to suck the life out. You want as flat response of a space as possible so you capture the most accurate recording.
Oh, Mr. Tool, would you suggest me putting bass traps behind the corners, in the corners where my speakers sit?
So it looks like your speakers are honestly a little too close to the corner.
Yeah.
So even if you put a bass trap there, you're gonna have to move them out. I would move them out, relatively on the 45-degree vector, about a foot away from the corner itself, if not a little more. And then yes, bass traps should be placed at the same horizontal vector as the speaker cone.
Okay.
So don't put it up in the top of the corners. Don't put it at the floor. Put it right in line with that, because that's the first area in which those low frequency bass waves start traveling out. Remember, those waves take a very long time to finish their cycles.
Yeah.
It takes a very long time. So not in regard, I'm sorry, by time, I mean length, right? The length of the wave. So bass traps are relatively necessary. What's happening in your system right now, if I'm looking at it, is that you're losing some of your low end as you're monitoring. So you are going to mix according to that. You're like, oh, I'm missing a lot of the low end in my bass. So you end up then turning the bass up in whatever instrument you're looking to do that in. Well, then you get in the car and all of a sudden it's so bassy. Like, what the hell happened? What did I do? That's because the room changed your perception. The room did something to change the way you're hearing the sound. So yeah, I would move that out about a foot from the corner if possible. And then you could place a bass trap right behind it just to kind of control it. Now, again, the bass trap, depending on which one you choose, could do the opposite effect. it could actually suck the life out even more so because it's so absorptive. And that would even further your issue. So you're going to have to find the right type of trap to put there. You might want to, again, search through some of the stuff Oralex recommends. And then they'll also give you, and the great thing about Oralex is they'll give you a degree of angle. They'll give you the spacing. They'll give you the square footage. You can actually upload, Mike, your entire room specs, and they can show you every piece of material you should have and every piece of material and its placement. So if you go to Oralex's website, they do a great job, and they do that. I believe it's for free, because of what they're all about, just making sure everyone has the right space. They actually were set to come in when I first started the program. They were actually allowed to be on campus to come in and measure the room. We ended up going with another company that then asked for carpet, which the school didn't approve, and the ceiling panels, which the school did approve. So we ended up with those, and it was more of a local company. But again, the cool thing about this is they allow you to, basically customize a kit. And I don't know where it is now because they've changed their website. It looks so much better now. But yeah, you can do your room design layout here. I think this was it right here. Flash for a second. Oh, here it is. Room Layout Express app. So you can do that right there on their app, and they'll tell you exactly, what you need. You take pictures, you do your measurements, and they'll recommend a kit that you can get to make sure you have everything you need. Now, again, if you already have stuff, which you do, you can then go just right into their regular shop and get the pieces that you would need to fill out their recommendations.
So was that like the RLX app?
I think so. It's RLX. Fastest way to select the best acoustical treatment for your space. Yep. And they had this for a very long time. It used to be something you do through the website, but I guess now through the app, it's much easier because you can go in and show them the space and you can measure the room and all that stuff. So they take advantage of some of the new technology out there. All right. Before we get out of here, anybody else have a question? Cool. All right. So we will be back in class tomorrow. Again, spend the rest of your day today on this rainy, crappy day, getting your research done, getting your songs, getting your sounds, getting everything you need to hit the ground running tomorrow. You're going to have 4 days to get this project done technically. And for those of you who are, I don't know if anyone's in here that's actually all virtual student. I don't think so. Sad. But just get everything you need so you can hit the ground running tomorrow. It's going to be a very quick week after it's all said and done. We have math and science, we have Ambrose and the test. So a lot of things will kind of factor into the rest of the week. Just be prepared. All right. Otherwise, if anyone missed Project 4, hasn't handed in Project 5, I'm not going to be taking off additional points for not being in class to upload your sound. I spoke to somebody, I think, last week in regards to I wasn't there. I didn't get it uploaded. Now you guys are virtual. So I won't be taking any additional points, but just know that you had to have all your paperwork in by a certain date, and Google Classroom automatically takes points off when you're late. But they don't know that the audio was placed on the server. So that's the good thing. So make sure you have everything in from the past 2 projects, because like I said to you, the next few weeks is going to be fast and furious with projects, small projects, big projects, long-term, short-term, all leading up into a live half-hour radio show that we're going to be doing in class with everybody involved. And yes, it will be everyone involved, and we will be doing it. Thank you very much, everybody. Everyone enjoy the rest of their rainy day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow in the AM and the PM. Holla, holla, holla.